I say, you know what also is burning images?
Florida's Parental Rights and Education Bill, signed into law, faces controversy.
Yeah, I mean, so I still don't get the controversy, but I did find out where the supposed the what they're saying about the gay people or gay rights being infringed on
Mm-hmm.
was that one of the writers of the bill, it came from a situation where the student was transgender and this at home they did not affirm it, and so the school behind the parents back was affirming and counseling and talking to the child without the parents knowledge, and that's
Oh.
some of the stuff that started the bill.
I know that.
Hmm.
So that's where it all comes from about the don't say gay stuff. But the bill itself is 4 pages, very easy to read, very straightforward, very open ended, actually. As to break it down in the straightest terms possible, teacher cannot, a kindergarten through third grade teacher cannot have a private conversation with a student about sexuality or gender identity. That's it, without the parents' knowledge. So on its face, that's not a terrible thing, right?
Wait, does it say
Like,
private conversation or does it say they cannot
Yes.
receive classroom
No, that's-
instruction?
no, that is the whole thing about the bill. It actually okays classroom instruction because it doesn't stop like sex education. It just prohibits a teacher having a secret or private conversation
Mm.
with kinder through third graders.
Tough,
But it also-
because working with kids on the day-to-day basis, and you become someone that they trust and they want to have this conversation with you, and you have to say, I'm sorry, I cannot. So I understand. I think that's fair, not having private conversations, because you don't know what's going on at home. You don't know what the child has been led to believe. So I can understand having like a monitored conversation, or one with the parents present, and not just with the child themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what is it saying, is that you just need parents' permission to have those conversations.
That's fair.
The way I understood the bill was basically saying, like, it was vague to me in saying there should be no classroom instruction regarding gender identity or sexual orientation. And then there was an addendum to that saying, or otherwise deemed inappropriate for the classroom. And I think that part is also vague. So what I've heard is like some people oppose this law because they kind of feel like it's government censorship. Like, what happens when you're in kindergarten grade drawing a family picture and you have two dads and it's not going to go on the wall? Like, I think that's kind of like what people are thinking, and I'm not sure if that's true or not.
Well, that the bill has nothing to do with anything like that, because the bill restricts heterosexual conversations just as much as it does gay conversations, like in that aspect, right?
Okay.
So, like, yeah, you can't go tell a kid you're a sinner, you're going to hell, because the kid has traits that you would deem, heterosexual, or So, it's really weird, the opposition to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the bill's kind of very vague in a lot of areas and leaves a lot of interpretation to school boards to actually make decisions.
Is it also true that this bill allows parents to sue the school districts if something like this were to happen?
I don't know about that per se, but that would make sense to me, right? Like,
yeah, but that also opens up the school to like frivolous lawsuits.
Yeah.
Well, but again, to get a legal definition on a few things, you got to go through the court system, and that's a couple of lawsuits of judges making rulings, disagreeing with others, and like working out a direction to go. So, I mean, that's part of the system, is working it through the courts.
And
Now, the big thing is that the federal government getting involved in the situation and threatening DOJ.
Well, the Department of Education, I know, is investigating to see if any civil rights are being violated by this law, which, how it's written, I don't believe so. Like, I know that most schools don't even have sexual, like, education until, like, 5th grade anyway. So I think, like, a private conversation is different than, like, the media interpretation of you just can't say these things. Like, and that was my, like, that's how I interpreted it. Like, the backlash is that there's like, well, no, like, then, you know, this person, we can't say that this person has 2 dads or 2 moms. Like, we can't talk about it. But a private conversation is different, especially wanting to know what's going on with your kid.
Yeah, and that was the example that they gave of why the bill was written. You know, I can understand how that's interpreted because it was a transgender child at the time. The parents weren't affirming it. You know, they had different beliefs. They were, you know, hey, this is a phase and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so the school doing more or less parenting the child behind the parents' back upset the parents, thus started this snowball.
Yeah. I would really love to see the psychology behind kids who come out a lot sooner in life versus like kids who come out a whole lot later in life as either part of the LGBTQ community, and like what the, I guess, like their happiness or suicide rates. Like, I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah, and that's where it really comes into the whole conversation about it, right? Like, I guess we need more definitions or more answers that people really can't give.
Yeah.
Because I don't think, I've never thought from reading this bill that it's going to block like a gay teacher talking about their life in the class, right?
Right.
Like if a gay teacher is like, you know, my husband, I don't see how that's going to prevent it. But now that teacher sitting down with a student after hours without parents' permission. Now, if that child had some questions about being gay, right? Like, hey, I think this, that, that's where this bill comes into effect. That teacher should call those parents and say, hey, your student came to me with this, you know, how do we progress forward?
Or like, what's like a defined sense of like student confidentiality? Like, is that something where you say, nope, you got to talk to the school counselor and like point them in that direction to handle that conversation?
I mean, honestly, Alan, you could, I would refer to him on this because, you know, I'm not a dad, right? I understand how I would feel, but in that situation, what do you think is the proper course of action, right? Do you want them to call you and discuss the matter, or do you want them to sit down with your child and discuss the matter without you knowing?
I think I would want them to call me and discuss it.
But here's the other piece of it. Like, you are you, right? Where you've told our kiddo, hey, you tell me anything, there would be no judgment, right? Whereas a parent who maybe they can't have that conversation with them, like, shouldn't they also have a safe haven to talk about that or find information out if they're not like, you're a school librarian, you know, to see like, what are my options? Like, maybe she can't directly talk to the kid and be like, okay, well, here's the whole rundown of what it is to be part of this community, but rather, here are some resources, you check it out.
Yes. So, and we've actually talked about this in my library classes before, you know, teens or minors coming in and having questions about LGBTQ. And it's, you know, if a child went to a teacher asking those questions, I would think the teacher would either need to go to the parent, be like, hey, your child's asking these questions, or tell the child, unfortunately, I can't have this conversation with you, but here are some age-appropriate resource materials so where you can find more information for yourself. Because if you're working in a public library and you have a minor come in with their parent and the minor's like, ooh, I want this information, and the parent says, no, you can't have that, then you know there's nothing we can do about it. We can point them in the right direction, but ultimately it's always up to the parent. And that's what can be frustrating sometimes.
And that's the next question in it, because I think that comes back to where the federal government stepping in and talking about violating people's rights. When does a child's rights actually come into full fledged, right? Like, a parent is still responsible for that child up until a certain age. So can you say that the parental rights supersede the child's rights in those situations?
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you as a parent can get arrested for your kid being truant, like, consistently, like, yeah, absolutely. If your child, I think the Parkland shooter, weren't the parents of the shooter sued from the other parents of the victims?
The mother had some very sketchy stuff posted online, if I remember right, on that situation.
I remember that.
So, like, if you can be liable for that, you should also be liable other ways.
But, and then that's also, I mean, in another, I guess, societal question that we have to answer to move forward on a subject like this is, what do we consider gay? Is it a lifestyle? Is it a sexuality? Is it, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because sexual identity, sexual gender, sexual preferences, these are all different categories in themselves. And then they have their own branches.
Yeah, and over the last couple of years, they've really tried to separate gender from sexuality, right? So when you're dealing with, so it gets into too many gray areas and too many what ifs, what that. So the simplest solution to me is call the child's parents. Like, get the child's parents involved, and I think that's what this bill does.
Honestly, if our kiddo's teacher calls me and says, "Hey, your kiddo's having these questions. Is it okay if I talk to him about it, or would you like to be here when I talk to him?" I'd be okay with that. Like, if like, obviously in elementary school I would want to be there, but if it were middle school or high school, I would be willing, if he didn't feel comfortable talking about it around me or wanting to hear about it around me, then he should absolutely have a safe place to do that.
Yeah.
But of course, like, you
with
do
your
have
permission.
with my permission.
Yeah. And that's the hard thing, especially like here in the deep South Texas. You know, you have very conservative parents who have very conservative values, and they don't want to acknowledge it. You know, we're still fighting to have books in the library where a kid just talks about, oh yeah, my uncle's gay, and they're like, hey, that needs to be taken off the shelf.
Yeah, I think that's fucking bullshit.
Yeah, you know.
Well, I mean, yes, our beliefs aside in the situation, the only thing I can say is we're not allowed to have certain things on one end, right? Like, you're not gonna do you find the Bible in y'all's library, like religious texts?
Yeah, I've seen
it talks about different ones. Yeah,
there's like Christian, like, literature and like all this other stuff.
So I mean, right there, then you should allow those. You should allow the opposite, right? The other side. So you should allow my uncle's gay book. Yeah. There's nothing. I don't know how else to put it.
Wait.
Yeah, I see it. I see. Yeah, I see that. I just, you know, I feel like it's this extreme censorship, right? Like, gay people are real people, right? Like, these are relationships that exist, right? There's a dynamic where somebody has two dads or two moms, or has a transgender dad, or has family. Like, I have family that's transgender. I have family that's gay. These are real relationships for me. So, like, to me, like, acknowledging these people is representation, right? Because they should be represented. It's a part of life now. But it's a whole other thing to have, like, a conversation of your own personal beliefs about the subject with my child. Like,
yes, and that right there. I guess the way I put it the other day is that this bill prevents teachers from being activists in younger ages, right? Like, whatever you're being an activist for, you can't. All you can do is teach.
Yeah. Because, like, we wouldn't let a teacher have a private conversation with the child about being a Nazi or part of the KKK.
Yeah, no.
And I know that's extreme.
Well, I wouldn't go at those examples, but we're not gonna, teachers aren't supposed to be telling, hey, you need to go to church, right? Like,
Yeah.
they can't say that. What's the issue right here?
I remember my 6th grade teacher, her name was Miss McDaniels, and she was talking about the science, our science program, and she made a comment. She's just like, yeah, but evolution didn't exist. It's all from our divine creator. And like, I just like started nervous sweating like in my secular household. Like, this is public school.
Son of a bitch.
But that would be the point that I keep asking is, what are we gonna call, like, is gay a sexuality or is it this? Because if we're gonna say this is our sexual preferences, I don't think we need to talk about that with young children. That's more of a high school, maybe late middle school thing. But then again, the conversation has been to separate gender and sexuality. So if you're just talking about, hey, I don't feel like I'm in the right body, then that's a different conversation altogether.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think them calling it the Don't Say Gay bill is really bad taste, really misrepresents what the bill is, and should be offensive to gay people, not.
Yeah, it's like they're pandering to the religious vote on this or something. Like, I don't fucking get it.
Well, and a lot of people argue that wokeism is a new form of religion, right? Like it took that place, right? You have your tenets instead of the 10 Commandments. You have the list on Black Lives Matter's website, the tenets of what they call, and I mean it with human history, it does track. We like religion, right? So we tend to change it rapidly, as we've seen through history. So,
well, that wraps up another great episode. And don't forget to join our amazing and supportive community on Discord.
In our Discord, you can find game nights, watch parties, food pics, Dungeons and Dragons, and more. What's not to love about that? We have a little something for everyone. Head over to our website, officialmillennials.com, and you'll find more info, especially our featured gamer of the week.
Speaking of something for everyone, we have a book club. We read a book almost every month and talk through it together. We also have a special perk for our subs to discuss other books in a series called Chapter 2.
Don't forget to swing by YouTube and drop us a follow at Official Millennials. You can also find us on Twitter at MillsOfficial. We appreciate all the support, and y'all have a good one.
This is an Official Millennials production.